People love him already. He's got the Rhode Island twang.
The long pass to Moore and a pin block from Martin.
Tune in to Cam's Corner.
He's going to make it here.
Draws the foul for another Rhode Island and one.
Podcast. Got his own
podcast. It's good off the backboard and in. On a break.
And we are back, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Cam's Corner, Season 3, Episode 27, Episode 95 overall, so still on that road to 100 episodes. But today's joining me this season, this NBA season, entering his 35th year before the season started, calling Heat games on TV and is among the longest tenured broadcasters in the NBA. It's Reid of the Miami Heat. Eric, it's an honor. Thank you so much for joining me.
Cam, my pleasure. I know you're a URI guy, and I spent the 6 great years working in Providence, Rhode Island. For 3 of those years, I did Brown University football. And one of my favorite all-time Brown radio broadcasts was a Brown URI game when Bob Griffin, I think, was coaching the Rhode Island Rams. He had Tom Earhart as his quarterback, Damian Riley as his wide receiver. They were one of the highest scoring, highest octane offenses in the country at that time. It was a great game at Brown Stadium, which Rhode Island won.
Yeah, Rhode Island football is so fun to cover. I was able to cover it these past 2 seasons because I wasn't at URI for all 4 years. I went to Rhode Island College in Providence, transferred my junior year to URI, and getting closer. I feel like the football team's always so open with the media. They're super friendly, so building a lot of connections there and friendships was awesome. And to see them, prosper last season they had a pretty good season as well. But we had a lot of mutual Rhode Island connections. Cole Swider, I wanted to thank for hooking this podcast up. Wanted to start off by asking you, your first initial thoughts of Cole when he first hopped on the scene in Miami, and what it's been like for you seeing like new generations of young athletes coming in and out each year.
Well, it's great. I mean, every year it's a different story, and you have a different team. And I think one of the real joys of the job is getting to know players that are on your team and players around the league, coaches around the league, officials, media people. It's a neat thing to interact with all kinds. And for us this year, listen, I've been with the Heat for 36 years. That's a lot of players that have come and gone. I got some favorites that were Syracuse guys. On our first couple of teams, Ronnie Cycli was the first draft pick ever at the Heat. He was our first franchise sort of player at a Syracuse University. Sherman Douglas joined us in year 2 or year 3. But to have Cole come in this year, listen, we have a track record in Miami of finding, I call it discovery and then development. You got to find players that slip between the cracks and don't get drafted. And then it's your job to develop all the players that come into your program, whether they're young, medium, or old. But there's a guy named Duncan Robinson who came out of a Division III school in New England and then went on to Michigan, then went undrafted into Miami, and now he's become one of the great 3-point shooters in the game. Who followed Duncan Robinson? It was Max Strus, undrafted out of DePaul, went to a small school before that, got cut by a couple of teams before he got to Miami. And as soon as he got to Miami, it was lock and trail. He followed Duncan Robinson everywhere Duncan went. Duncan had just gotten his big contract, and Max wanted to do everything that Duncan had done, all the player development, all the conditioning, all the work that went into it. He did. Ironically, he took Duncan's minutes. He assumed Duncan Robinson's role last year and had a great season, moved on. He got paid with a great free agent contract to join the Cleveland Cavaliers. And in comes your friend and my new friend, Cole Swider, who played a little bit with the Lakers last year, was on a 2-way contract, also played in the G League, and then came to us in much the same way on a 2-way contract. I became very interested in Cole because of his background. Number one, he's from Portsmouth, Rhode Island. Having spent 6 years in the beautiful Ocean State, that immediately caught my attention. I spent 6 years doing Providence College basketball during the glorious great days of the Big East in the 80s. So when I saw that Cole went 3 years at Villanova and then 1 season at Syracuse, the first thing I wanted to know was, how did that happen? How did he get to Villanova? Why did he leave Villanova and come to Syracuse? Those were all questions that I was looking forward to, and ultimately had that conversation with Cole. The thing that drew me much closer to Cole Swider, it's a personal story. I have a daughter who's a high school senior and is really into broadcast journalism. She took a summer class at Syracuse University this past summer and fell in love with the Newhouse School of Communications and that great university in central New York. She applied their early decision. I shared that information with Cole. And from the day I told Cole about my daughter, Darielle, being interested in Syracuse, I'm telling you, there wasn't a day that went by when I saw him that he didn't ask me, did you hear yet? Did you hear yet? And then one day I got to tell him she got in. She got in as an early decision applicant. And then it became, can we afford to send her there? And thank goodness it all worked out. But Cole was so involved with the whole process in terms just of his interest. And he celebrated it with me and my family. And just a couple of weeks ago, he met my wife and my youngest of three, Darielle, who just got accepted to Syracuse. And it was such a joyful meeting. He felt like he knew them already, my wife and daughter. They were so happy to meet him. They took pictures together, and it was something we shared and celebrated together. In terms of Cole as an NBA player, I think he's got a chance. I really do, because he's got the Duncan Robinson, Max Strus size at 6'6", 6'7", and he's got their type of shooting stroke. And in the NBA right now, and in basketball overall, the 3-point shot is king. If you have that's currency right now. If you got 3-point shooting range, there's a chance that you're going to find a place in professional basketball. Of course, you got to do other things well. It's not just standing around for open jump shots. You got to work so hard without the ball. You got to be in great condition to run off screens and run in half court. And Cole is doing all of that. And he's had some moments. He's just got to keep working and getting stronger and keep working on his game. But I think he's got a future in the league. And my heart always goes out to players like Cole Swider or Orlando Robinson, Jamal Cain, guys that are bouncing back and forth between the G League and the NBA. It's a big step, and it's also a thin line of separation. So Cole has had great games in the G League, and now he's just looking to transfer that over. But I've become a big fan of his. I love his story. I got to meet his parents, and I'm just intrigued with his journey right now.
Yeah, Cole's got a great mindset too, and I love when people are invested. When people take an investment to others. Like, I didn't really know Cole as much growing up, but once I started to get my podcast off the ground, he noticed that I was from Rhode Island. I started to get bigger name people on the podcast. He finally gave me a shot. I was able to interview him, and then right like that, he was like, "Oh, I could probably connect you with Eric Reid. Have you ever heard of him?" And I was like, "The name sounds familiar because you say Providence College. I was going to ask you a few Providence College questions as well, but just like that, it was in the blink of an eye where he sent me your contact and." He put the good word in for me. So people like that are huge and monumental and like progressing. So congrats to Cole for sure.
Cam, it's a great story of just human relations because of the way Cole gave his heart and extended his thoughts to me and my daughter and my family. That stays with you. Anytime anybody takes that kind of an interest in your child, right? So the minute we've had so many conversations. We always take the early bus to games together. And one day recently on that early bus, he said, "Hey, I got a buddy," and he told me about you. And the minute he asked, "Can I give him your number? Can you guys talk?" It was an automatic yes. Now, even had he not extended himself to me, I would have said yes. I believe in giving back to the next generation of broadcasters and sportscasters. But because of the connection that Cole and I had developed, it was an automatic yes. And I couldn't wait I didn't ask a favor of him, and this wasn't really asking a favor of me, but I couldn't be happier to hook up with you and to do something that Cole asked of me. So, in thinking about Rhode Island and Rhode Island basketball, it's a small state with a real rich tradition of basketball. And I can't help, as I talk to you now, to think of the great and late Billy Reynolds of the Providence Journal, who in my estimation, my favorite basketball writer ever. And I've read a lot of basketball stories over many, many years. He played at Brown. He's an iconic person in Providence, Rhode Island, and in the state. Grew up in Barrington and just recently passed away over the last few months. If you haven't read any of his books, I suggest that you do, to you and all of your listeners. He had a gift to be able to express himself and cover the game like no other basketball writer I've ever enjoyed.
Yeah, most definitely. And like I said, I want to definitely get into some Providence questions for sure. And just getting, for the listeners that don't know who you are and, want to have like a better background, better knowledge of who you are. Grew up in New York, went to Ithaca College, 75 to 90, excuse me, 1975 to 79. Of course, studying communications. Just run me through that journey at Ithaca as far as finding your passion for broadcasting, because for me, it wasn't right away like play by play. Like I didn't really know what I wanted to do, as a lot of sports media majors, not sure of exactly what's going to stick. But once I got behind the mic and I was comfortable and I realized that this is what I wanted to do, I wanted to take it in stride. So for someone like you, what was that journey like heading into Ithaca?
Cam, it's funny, out of adversity, when you walk through the door of adversity, it usually leads you to better things. And I think my adversity as a kid growing up was wanting to be, a high school basketball player in my hometown. And the day I got cut from my high school basketball team in my junior year, I had a series of ankle injuries, but nothing broke my heart as a young man more than that. It really impacted me, at first in a negative way, and then in a positive way, because it made me think, back to my junior year of high school, how am I going to stay involved with this game that I love so much and I'm so passionate about, and talking about it, learning about it, being around it. And I immediately thought, like, I either got to be a writer or a broadcaster. And I grew up, this was growing up in the 60s and 70s. There was no internet. Every game was not on TV. I was fascinated with listening to games on the radio. It was a weird thing to be fascinated by, but I just really enjoyed listening to games on radio. And I fell in love with the art of radio play-by-play, even as a young man. And me and a couple of buddies for high school football games, I would sit in the corner of our bleachers in Massapequa, New York, and we would broadcast the games. I actually prepared for these games, did it into a tape recorder. The only airplay it got was all my buddies were on the football team, so every Saturday night at our high school football parties, before we started enjoying the night, the whole team would want to, hey, pop the tape in and let's listen to the game. And it was really funny. But so I had it in my mind, I want to be a broadcaster. And my parents supported my dream. I went off to Ithaca College. And the best thing that happened to me at Ithaca College, to be honest with you, it was my sophomore year at Ithaca College. Cornell University is located in the same town as Ithaca College. So Ithaca sits on the South Hill, Cornell is on the East Hill. And there was a game that Cornell University was playing against the University of Pennsylvania. My former high school basketball coach at Massapequa, a man named Bob Weinhauer, was the head coach at Penn back in those days. It was right after he had taken them to the Final Four. Believe it or not, I think in 1976, lost to Magic Johnson's Michigan State team. They're the last Ivy League team, by the way, to make it to a Final Four. Well, Bob Weinhauer in Penn was in Ithaca to play Cornell. I found a buddy of mine that had a car. I said, Rich, can you drive me over to the Cornell game? I want to see my old high school coach and go to this game. We go to the game. Cam, I don't remember any details about the game, but something that I'll never forget happened that night. I look across the court to the Cornell University broadcast booth, and I see the WHCU banner. There were two announcers there. I didn't recognize the play-by-play guy. The gentleman doing the color that night was a student at Ithaca College. His name was Dave Story. He was a senior. I was a sophomore. The minute the game ended, I ran down the bleachers, across the court, up the other bleachers, and they just got off the air. I call him over. I said, Dave, what are you doing? He said, Eric, I do color on the home games, and I'm getting one academic credit at Ithaca College for it. It was a situation called radio workshop. If you get an internship, you get one credit. I said, how did you get that internship? He said, the play-by-play guy is the news director, and I got it from him. Right on the spot, I said, could you introduce me to him? Introduces me to him. I make an appointment to see the guy later in the week. I go visit him down in downtown Ithaca, and the gentleman said to me, if you stay up this summer and do a news internship, I'll give you the Cornell basketball internship next season. Well, I stayed that summer in Ithaca, New York. I did the news internship. He gives me the Cornell basketball internship. My junior year of college, I'm set to do the 13 Cornell home games as a color analyst. I am home on Thanksgiving break. in Massapequa, New York, on Long Island at my parents' house. My phone rings. It's the general manager of WHCU Radio in Ithaca, and he says, Eric, Al Beller, the play-by-play guy, his wife is about to have a baby. He can't do the season opening game at Syracuse. Can you do it? Of course. I pick up a buddy of mine in New York City in my car. We make the 5-hour trip to Syracuse, New York in a blizzard. My car actually slid off the road about an hour and a half south of Syracuse. I got to the game maybe 15 minutes before it tipped off. This was so long ago. It was before the Dome. They were still playing at the Manley Fieldhouse. I did that game by myself. I did one other game that season, Cornell at Niagara, by myself. The rest of the games, I was the color analyst at home. By the time I was a senior, the following year, the station hired me to travel with the Cornell basketball team and do the road games play-by-play, and I did the home games as the color analyst. And Cam, the blessing for me is I have not missed a basketball season as a broadcaster since my junior year at Ithaca College. It's, I think, 46 or 47 years in a row of doing play-by-play for somebody. And right out of college, the general manager of that station that was owned by Cornell, who had done Cornell football for 25 or 30 years, retired. And right out of college, for the whopping sum of $10,000 a year, I became sports director at WHCU in Ithaca, New York. And I did play-by-play for Cornell football, basketball, and lacrosse. And that's how my career started. From there, I went to New England. I did 6 years of Providence College basketball on radio. 3 years into that, I got involved almost accidentally in TV, doing the New England College Lacrosse Game of the Week for Nesson. I had done, 5 years of Cornell lacrosse on radio. I see an article in the Boston Herald one day while I was in New England that Nesson was going to televise the New England College Lacrosse Game of the Week. Another freaky thing. I picked up the phone, called Nesson. 2 weeks later, Nesson calls me back, hires me over the phone to do play-by-play on their 12 or 13 game lacrosse package. And after I did that, Nesson hired me to be the voice of Boston College football on TV. They still allowed me to do my Providence basketball on radio, and I became the pregame and then postgame show host for the Boston Red Sox. And from there, the world of television opened up to me. So that's my long, short story of how it started. And then I was fortunate enough to get the job with the Miami Heat in 1988. For the first season of Heat basketball. So listen, to get an NBA or an NFL or an NHL job, you got to be good. You've also got to be lucky. And, I was definitely so lucky and blessed to not only get to the NBA, but think about it. I got hired by an expansion team, the 88-89 Miami Heat. I've taken it one game at a time my whole life, and here it is, 36 years, over 2,600 games later. And the joy I'm getting from it still, Cam, that's the reward. Forget about the awards. It's about the rewards of being passionate about what you do, and the joy I've given it and the joy it's given back to me.
Yeah, I was gonna say so many different awards and honors over the years of your longevity of the career. And biggest thing for me, I wanted to ask you as an aspiring broadcaster is obviously back then it was much different than what the new technology is now, as far as sending reels and making portfolio websites and stuff like that. For someone like you, obviously connections is huge, meeting people and things like that. But going from job to job, what was that process like of making a reel, sending it to somebody, and then like waiting to hear back and figure out what the next step was?
It's a good question. Listen, there are a lot of no thank yous before somebody says yes. And I think you got to have that passion to want to do it. You got to have that belief that you're going to do it. And I always say this to young broadcasters or people in any profession. There are 1,000 different ways to get to the same place. Each of us have to find our way. My belief and the path that I took is getting in the position to do what it is that you want to do. And for me, I've always done play-by-play. So by getting an entry-level job in a small market of doing it, that's the path I took by chance. But that's the way you get better at it, by repeatedly doing it. And if you're not working on your craft, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of other young people out there that are working on their craft and improving. So, but listen, you could be an intern somewhere doing something totally different and a job might open up and you could get it that way. So that's what I'm saying. Each of us has to find our own way. I applied for many different jobs. Listen, I told you this, one of the great stories that ever happened to me is when, I'm at Ithaca College and it's my senior year. And I had told you how I had done the Cornell basketball stuff. Well, it appeared in the Ithaca Journal one day that I was hired to be the sports director at WHCU, and I was going to be the new voice of Cornell football. And one day I'm walking off the campus of Ithaca College, getting ready to walk downtown, and I'm walking across the football practice fields at Ithaca College. And at that time, the football coach at Ithaca was a legendary gentleman by the name of Jim Butterfield. He has since passed away. Jim was an iconic Division III football coach with a thick New England accent and a thicker passion for the sport of college football. And he sees me walking across the fields and he bellows out, "Eric." I look back. He goes, "Don't ever forget where you came from, Eric." And believe me, I never have. The humility stays with you, and it's more, I stay humble and I stay grateful and thankful that I've done something that I've enjoyed all these years, and now doing it at the NBA level with the Miami Heat.
Yeah, and back to those Rhode Island ties too. Again, talked about Providence College a lot before getting into these questions, but again, you spent 6 seasons with them. We're with them for the '87 run from the Final Four. Rick Pitino was there, and that scene was probably one of the best, most legendary seasons or runs in Providence College history. So to be able to be the voice of that, just run me through that and what the responsibilities were at the time for you too.
Cam, it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, professionally and personally. I got to Providence, I think, in 1982. At that time, Joe Mulaney, who was the legendary Providence College coach, he had left, gone to the NBA, was at Brown University coaching. When Dave Gavitt left Providence, he replaced himself with Joe Mulaney. And Joe Mulaney had some talent on those first few teams. We had players like Otis Thorpe and Ricky Tucker, a point guard out of Philadelphia, Ron Jackson, a forward out of Boston. But the team wasn't very good, even though we had some very good players. We were at the bottom of the Big East. I remember those first few Big East tournaments. There was the 8-9 game. The 8th seed versus the 9th seed at the bottom of the Big East standings would play in the tournament the night before the tournament began, and the loser would be on their way home before the Big East tournament really began. And in the 2 years prior to Pitino's arrival, it's funny, the two teams that met in the 8-9 game 2 years in a row, Seton Hall and Providence. And by the time I left the Big East, they had both been to a Final Four. Providence under Pitino, Seton Hall under PJ Carlissimo, and they lost that heartbreaking game to Glenn Rice and the Michigan Wolverines. But to be a part of Pitino's revival, for a long time, it was the highlight of my basketball broadcasting career. And I felt like I was eyewitness to one of the truly greatest coaching jobs I've ever seen, because there was not a player on that Providence team that made the NBA for more than a few minutes. Billy Donovan, had the proverbial cup of coffee with the Knicks before embarking on his tremendous coaching career. But what Pitino did with his coaching staff, and it was an incredible coaching staff that had Gordon Chiesa, who was a 30-year NBA assistant, Stu Jackson, who went on to have an incredible career. Jeff Van Gundy was a graduate assistant on that staff. Herb Sendek went on to become a great college coach. He was on that staff. The conditioning, the skill work, the player development, it was incredible. And also, Providence, I'll never forget a guy that was the editor of the Basketball Times magazine. His name was Larry Donald. The year before Providence went to the Final Four, we had a game in Miami against the Miami Hurricanes. And Larry Donald did a story on Providence and called them a Panasonic team. Panasonic was, you've heard of that company. Their tagline was slightly ahead of their time. Well, Providence was ahead of its time in style of play. Pitino brought full court pressure on defense and three-point shooting on offense. There are some basketball historians, including Rick Carlisle, the great coach of the Pacers, that gives Pitino credit for changing the game. So Pitino as a coach, I would say Steph Curry as a player, two of the more transcendent personalities in basketball that really had a large hand in changing the way the game was perceived and now played with three-point shooting taking over. So the job Pitino did was incredible. Going to the Final Four was unthinkable. It doesn't happen at a place like Providence very often. Matter of fact, I live a minute from Florida Atlantic University, and I was reminded of the Providence run last year when Dusty May took FAU to the Final Four last year. It's a wonderful miracle when it happens to a smaller school, and I'm just glad that I was a part of it because, like Pat Riley says about winning an NBA championship, it only counts for 1 year, but the memories, the joy you get from it lasts for the rest of your life, for the players, coaches, fans, and yes, for broadcasters too. So we've had many great reunions with that 1987 Providence team, and thanks to social media, I've been able to stay in touch with so many of the players and former coaches that were on that staff. Fortunately, I've lived through 7 trips to the NBA Finals with the Heat, 3 NBA championships. I've watched Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, two of the greatest coaches in NBA history, do their thing. I spent 8 years working with a Hall of Fame coach and Dr. Jack Ramsey as my broadcast partner. So I have been around some of the greatest coaching minds in basketball through the course of my career. So I said this to Dusty May after he took FAU to the Final Four. I know enough to know when I see great coaching, and I've seen it with Pitino. I've seen it with Coach Riley and Coach Spoelstra. I saw it last year with Dusty May. It's brilliant when you catch a rising star, whether it's a player or a coach.
Yeah, me and my family grew up PC fans. My dad was a huge Otis Thorpe guy growing up in Providence, and being for me, like the teams that I grew up watching was like like Chris Dunn and Bryce Cotton, Dante Henton, those like mid teens years, and just being able to watch that and be a part of history must be like so surreal for you. And again, like the 46 consecutive years of calling basketball, it must be cool to like look back at. It's inspiring for me, like I told you. A year after that, again, that was your first year with the Heat. I wanted to know your first day on the job, what that's like. Again, an expansion team, your first NBA gig, and now you're still doing this the past 35 years. So that first day, bring me back to 1988, that first day on the job with the Heat.
It was really wild, the pursuit of the Miami Heat job. It was the year before where the managing partner of the Miami Heat back in as they were an expansion team was a gentleman by the name of Louis Chaffel. Louis had a long resume of working in professional basketball. He was a general manager of the New Orleans Jazz. He was a former general manager of the New Jersey Nets, and then became the managing partner of the Miami Heat. When I was doing Cornell basketball, one day Louis Chaffel was driving through upstate New York and heard me call a game on radio and wrote me a note on New Orleans Jazz stationery saying, "Hey, you sound like a good young broadcaster. Keep up the work." When he went on to become the GM of the Nets, I applied for the Nets radio job. This was in 1984 and did not get it. And now it was 3 or 4 years later, and the Heat were coming into the league the following year, and a mutual friend of Mr. Chaffel and mine reached out to me and said, "Would you be interested in doing radio for the Miami Heat?" And I was like, even though I had just recently, over the 3 years prior, got involved with TV, I would have jumped and moved anywhere in the country to do NFL or NBA on radio. So I flew down to Miami and met with Louis Chaffel, and this was in the spring of '88. Okay, the following season is when the Heat were coming into the NBA, and we had this great interview. But right at the end, Mr. Chaffel said to me, "You know what I really want to do is simulcast our games, do radio and TV as one." Back then, there were 3 or 4 teams in the league that were doing it. The Lakers with Chick Hearn, the San Antonio Spurs, the Phoenix Suns with Al McCoy. Sam Smith was doing the simulcast for the Spurs. So there were 3 or 4 teams. So, and he said, if I can lure an experienced simulcaster to come to Miami, he said, then I want you to do color. And when I heard that, I was like, there's no way I could do color at the NBA level. Even though I did it at Cornell, And I did it at the beginning of my career at Providence. For my first 3 years at Providence, I was the color analyst for the legendary longtime voice of the Friars, a gentleman named Chris Clark. So I did it twice and pulled it off as a color analyst. But I was like, there's no way in the NBA, without being a former player or coach, would I be qualified to do that. So I left the interview like hoping and praying that he could not find a simulcaster. Now I go back to New England after the interview, and I resume my job with the Red Sox and resume my life up there. Again, free computers, right? So how am I going to follow this? I got a subscription to the Miami Herald delivered to my house on the east side of Providence. I loved it. I was walking distance from the Brown University football stadium. Charming time of my life to be able to walk to do my college football broadcast. So I got a subscription to the Miami Herald. It would show up at my house one day late. And that's how I followed the Miami Heat in the months before their first season. That's how I followed what they did in the NBA draft, what they did in the expansion draft. And my attitude was, if I get the job, I was so interested in it at that moment. And if I got the job, I would have been up to speed. And if I didn't get the job, I didn't care. I was investing my emotion and my mind and my heart, my soul and everything into following this. And then I don't hear anything back from the Heat. And one day in July, I open up my day old Miami Herald, and there it was. Heat hires Sam Smith from the San Antonio Spurs to do play-by-play on the simulcast. I close the Miami Herald. I pick up my house phone and I call up my boss at the New England Sports Network. And I said, Bob, I did not get the Miami Heat job. I'm back. Because at that time, Nesson, which was owned by the Red Sox and Boston Bruins, I was doing a lot of baseball play-by-play, both at the college level and at the AAA level, doing the Pawtucket Red Sox. The Boston Red Sox at that time had a great legendary TV man in Ned Martin, but they were grooming me to be his successor at some point. If I was a baseball guy, I would have never left. I would have stayed right there, because what greater place than Fenway Park is there to do Major League Baseball? So I told Nesson, listen, I'm back. And I actually got 3 games into my Boston college football season that year. And I don't hear back from the Miami Heat until September. The season's going to start. Training camp's going to open in October for the Heat. And one night I come home from playing in a summer league basketball game in Lincoln, Rhode Island. And my phone rings. I was home alone, 9:30 at night. I pick up the phone and I hear this, Eric, Louis Chaffel of the Miami Heat. And I almost fell down, because I tucked my dream goodnight. I said goodbye to that dream. I felt like I didn't get the job. It's not going to happen. And Mr. Chaffel says to me, remember what I told you about doing color? Well, I still want you to do color on our simulcast, but you got to fly down here immediately and meet with the general manager of Sports Channel Florida. And this was the key sentence, because he has play-by-play opportunities for you. Get down here as soon as you can. The next day I was on a plane, meeting with a man named Jeff Genthner, who was the general manager of Sports Channel Florida. And he laid out 2 things for me. Number one, I could do play-by-play for the University of Miami football program on Sports Channel. It was a tape delayed package, but who cares? I did the game live. I didn't care if it aired on tape delay. So I went from doing Boston college football and years of doing Ivy League football on radio. I'm going to do University of Miami football at the Orange Bowl. Also, I got the opportunity to work with the University of South Florida basketball program. And I got to do between 15 and 18 USF Sun Belt Conference basketball broadcasts on TV for Sports Channel Florida, and do color for the Heat. So that was 82 games of the Heat, plus 15 to 20 college basketball broadcasts. I had no life my first 3 years during the season. There was no time, anything but just prepare, do games, and travel to wherever I had to get for the next game. But those play-by-play opportunities gave me the confidence to take that leap of faith that I could do color at the NBA level. So being in the Big East for 6 years and seeing so much great college basketball talent, that helped me, and being around great coaches in the Big East. And what really helped me was the first head coach of the Miami Heat, a URI grad, Ron Rothstein, one of the great point guards in Rhode Island history. He was so giving with his time. He trusted me enough that not only did he allow me at every practice, I sat in on film sessions. He included me on so much and really fast tracked my NBA knowledge. And for 3 years, I was the color analyst on a simulcast and improved my NBA knowledge while staying sharp as a play-by-play guy, doing those side gigs that I told you about. And in year 4, the Heat moved me over to play-by-play, and I've been doing play-by-play ever since. Um, and in year 5 of the Heat, they split the simulcast, and we did our own radio broadcast, and TV was separate, and I became the full-time TV play-by-play broadcaster in year 4. But in year 5, we split TV and radio, and that's the way it's been ever since. So that's how I got my start with the Heat, and I I refer with a lot of gratitude and fondness from those early expansion years. You'd never want to repeat that because the Heat won 15, 18, and 24 games in those first 3 years. We lost our first 17 games as a franchise. And, about 7 years into the franchise, that's when Mickey Arison took over as the team's owner. And really, the first major thing he did was hire Pat Riley to leave the Knicks. And the minute Pat Riley joined the Miami Heat, the Heat changed instantly. You could count on one hand, probably, the people in professional sports, maybe in life, that can change the culture of an organization just by showing up. And Pat Riley is one of those people. So, from his first press conference as the head coach and president of the Heat on the Carnival cruise ship, the Imagination, and Pat talked about this vision he had of a championship parade down Biscayne Boulevard, and we've had 3 of them. So to be around the greatness of the Arison ownership and the Pat Riley leadership of the Miami Heat, it's been amazing to see the history of our franchise unfold 1 year at a time to now it's go from an expansion team to an elite championship seeking 3-time championship winning franchise. And we're very proud in Miami of the Heat's culture. It's turned some people off around the league maybe, but it's real. It's a culture that's real, that's based on team success, not individual accolades, and being in great condition and doing what it takes to win. And what a joy it's been no matter what program you're around, but a program that's been as significant and has been as outstanding year in and year out since Pat Riley got there. What a great blessing to be with the Miami Heat all these years.
Yeah, and again, like a huge honor for me, Eric, to be able to sit down and talk to you about all those experiences. I know you got to run in a little bit. I wanted to close off with asking like the transition, I guess, not so much transition, but the emotion behind playoff basketball. You get to call games for Tim Hardaway and Alonzo Mourning, then to LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and Shaquille O'Neal and all these iconic basketball players in the NBA. One, have you ever had like a starstruck moment with these types of players? And 2, what's the emotions behind calling a game in the NBA Finals and calling games during playoff basketball?
It's the best feeling of all. And unfortunately, the worst thing about being a TV play-by-play guy in the league, now the way the television rules are, you get to do the first round and that's it. But what's been really remarkable, the Heat over all these years since that rule change with local TV, the Heat has had me do a taped call of all the playoff games that are on national TV that I did not get to do on local television. I've done every one of them. And the Heat use it for their archives, and you'll hear my championship call from 06 over and over again. The Heat have used it.
Yeah.
I didn't really call the game, but I did call the game. But it's remarkable because the level of competition, how intense every possession is, how meaningful every moment is for the coaches, for the players, for the fans, and yes, for play-by-play broadcasters. It's a gift that you never stop enjoying. So, but I enjoy every game, Cam. I really, this is what I do repeatedly through my whole career. I prepare for each game and then I enjoy each game and rinse and repeat. Prepare, enjoy, prepare, enjoy. And that's the way it's gone for me. So, and I've learned with the preparation, it's just a little piece of what we all do. I take great pride in being super prepared for every game. But the key thing is you got to be unselfish in your preparation. You can't just use a nugget because you have it. The game is my ultimate boss. The game tells me what to talk about, not my preparation. The preparation is there. If you need a note, you can match it up with a moment. But whether you're a producer or a play-by-play guy or a color analyst, using too much is as bad as not having any information at all. So you let the game dictate what you talk about. But it's been a joy, Cam, to just be involved with this great game and to be doing it at the NBA level for 36 years. Just grateful and humble and appreciative of all this time I've had in this profession.
Yeah, Eric, I appreciate you again for hopping on. I know you got a tight schedule coming up with the season coming to an end. For someone like me, what would you give a piece of advice for a graduating senior that's heading into the field?
Be ready to relocate. Don't let a few no thank yous discourage you. Believe in yourself, make your dream come true, and go for it. The passion that we have as broadcasters is similar to how coaches feel about their profession. It's an uncommon road to travel, but when you get to, it's a joy. And I wish you the best of luck. And I know this is the first of many conversations that we'll have down the road.
Most definitely. I was just gonna say I want to keep in contact and let you know what's going on with me. I'll definitely send you over some of my stuff. Looking forward to hearing you throughout the remainder of the season. I'm a diehard Knicks fan, but now I told Cole I gotta listen to the Heat. I gotta listen to the Celtics for my guy Joe Mazzulla, and I gotta unfortunately deal with the Knicks. But I'll be watching them all at once to see you guys. And again, I appreciate it very much for you hopping on during your schedule.
Well, we have a lot in common because I grew up a Knicks fan. Mike Gorman, the TV voice of the Celtics, who's getting ready to retire, is one of my great friends and was a super role model and mentor when I was a much younger broadcaster in Rhode Island. So I like your choice of teams. You keep following Cole and the Heat, and best of luck to you in your career, Cam.